Hello, welcome to Simple IELTS. Today I will be discussing writing task 1, particularly bar chart. And in this lesson, you will learn how to understand the structure of writing, make a plan before writing, write a bar chart report, and use vocabularies to enhance your score. First, I would like to give a brief explanation about what a bar chart is. As you can see, a bar chart consists of a vertical line or y-axis that normally consists of quantity, volume, or anything that can be quantified. In this example is percentage. And then for the horizontal line or the x-axis, which normally consists of time, in this particular example, is years from 2007 to 2010. And then the most noticeable part about a bar chart is the rectangulars. And there are three rectangulars, and each represents uh, different countries, which are Tunisia, Japan, and Ecuador. And also there's a written information about this bar chart, this example. Let me read it for you. The chart below shows the GDP growth per year for three countries between 2007 and 2010. And then there's the instruction which we have to follow, which is summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So in essence, we have to make a summary out of this bar chart and compare where relevant. Compare the data. And then in regards to IELTS writing task 1, not just bar chart, but also the other varieties of IELTS writing task 1, there are two rules that you have to comply with. First is the time limit is only 20 minutes, and then the minimum amount of words is 150. If you write less than 150, you will lose marks. And then the question is how to make a good summary of the bar chart. First, we have to know the structure of writing. And a good structure of writing normally consists of three parts. First is the introduction, which is normally written in paragraph 1. This is where we have to introduce the chart by paraphrasing this written information. By paraphrasing, I mean we have to change the words here into words of our own making. That's for introduction. And then we have to write a summary of the bar chart that is normally written in paragraph 2, where we have to describe the general pattern of the data. By the general pattern, I mean what data that increases and what data that decreases. Or is there any noticeable features that we have to identify? For this example, there's a fluctuation here for Ecuador. So although in general from 2007 to 2010, the data is decreasing, but there's a fluctuation in the middle. So that we have to explain. And then the third part is the body, where we have to provide a detailed explanation about the chart. By detail, I mean we have to show numerical data. For example, for Japan in 2007, the GDP growth is only 2%, and then a year later, it rose to about 4%, so it doubled, and such detail we have to explain in part 1 and part 2. Part 1 we can explain about Japan or Tunisia or Ecuador that I will discuss later on. Okay, that's for the structure of writing. And then exactly before writing, we have to make a plan so that it can help you write more smoothly. So about the introduction, how do we make a plan? Is that by paraphrasing the written information by changing the words with its synonyms and or changing the sentence structure. And then about the overview, we have to give a summary, which like I previously said, we have to describe the general patterns of data. Japan's GDP from 2007 to 2010 rose consistently over time. That's for Japan. As for Tunisia, the highest was in 2007, but as the time went by, the GDP decreased consistently, and that is a little bit different with GDP growth of Ecuador, where there's a fluctuation, although generally it decreased over time, but there's a fluctuation in between, which happened in 2008 and 2009. That's for the overview part. And then for paragraph 3 and paragraph 4, we can make a plan more or less like this. In 2007, for Japan's GDP growth, it was the smallest of all the three countries, 2%. And then from 2007 to 2008, there was a rise around 2%, or the number doubled from 2% to around 4%. From 2008 to 2010, the number rose annually over time, gradually rose, and it peaked at more than 6% in 2010 at the end of the period. And then for Tunisia and Ecuador, which can be written in paragraph 4, as for Tunisia, the highest GDP growth was in 2007, which is more than 6%. And from 2007 to 2008, there was around a 2% decrease from more than 6% to more than 4%. And then in 2010, there was the lowest GDP growth in that year, which was 3%. As for Ecuador, from 2007 to 2008, there was a rise about 2%, and then the number decreased to its lowest, so it dove from around nearly 5% to around 1% in 2009. And then a year later, the number bounced slightly to around 2%. So that's a little bit discussion about how you make a plan before starting to write your essay. So because we only have about 2 minutes for doing this task, we have to set aside in the beginning about 1 or 2 minutes to make proper planning like this, so that we can write smoothly for the whole essay. Okay, and then let's discuss a little bit about synonyms, useful for IELTS writing test 1, not only for bar chart, but also for other varieties. So for increase, we can say rise, climb, and so on. As for decrease, the synonyms are fall, decline, falter, and the list goes on. As for stable, it can be to be steady, level off, or flatten out. When you want to say something that is just an approximation, you can say around or approximately, almost, about, etc. Okay, that's for synonyms. Now let's move on to write the bar chart essay. So first, for the introduction, like I previously explained, we can change the written information here by changing the words with synonyms and change the sentence structure. This is the sample that I already wrote, so let me read it for you. The chart illustrates the growth of GDP every year from 2007 to 2010 in Tunisia, Japan, and Ecuador. So, like I said, by using synonyms, the chart below has the same meaning with the chart illustrates. Show and illustrate have the same meaning, or we can also say demonstrate. And then the GDP growth here has the same meaning with the growth of GDP. Growth, I put it at the front and plus of following the growth, and then GDP. And then per year, I change it into every year, same meaning. And then for 3 countries here, I change it into specific terms. that is in Tunisia, Japan, and Ecuador. And for between 2007 and 2010, I changed it from 2007 to 2010. So that's for introduction. As for the overview part, like we already planned before, Japan's GDP increased, whereas Tunisia's and Ecuador's GDP decreased. But the GDP growth was unstable for Ecuador. So how do we write this? We can say overall, Japan's GDP showed consistent rise over the whole time span. Time span is has the same meaning with period, despite that it started the lowest in the beginning. By saying it started the lowest in the beginning, I mean that in 2007, Japan's GDP growth was the lowest of all the three countries. And also note that the way I use lowest can answer this instruction where we have to make comparison. So by saying the lowest, we already make a comparison in that sense. So let me continue. On the other hand, while Tunisia's and Ecuador's GDP suffered a downturn, that of the latter was unstable. By saying that of the latter, it means Ecuador's GDP. So when you talk about, when you explain a sequential information, like for example, Tunisia's, and then you explain Ecuador, and then you want to say them again in the next sentence, you can change them with former and latter. Former is for point number 1, as for latter is for point number 2. So that of the latter means GDP of Ecuador, or Ecuador's GDP. As for paragraph 3, Japan's GDP, in 2007, like we already planned before, we can say it like this. Although Japan's GDP was the lowest of all the three countries, I changed it into nations. So in that sense, we can show that we have a wide array of vocabularies that meaning our English is good enough in terms of vocabulary. In 2007, 2%. So although let me restate that although Japan's GDP was the lowest of all the three nations in 2007, 2%, it doubled to approximately 4% a year later. So why do I say approximately? It was because the number is not exactly 4%, but it was rather an approximation. So it's slightly over 4%. So if we say 4% without saying approximately, then we get it wrong. And then we can lose marks because of it. So make sure that you give an approximation word, like approximately or around, about, almost, something like that. I said a year later is the same as 2008 because after 2007 it's 2008. So rather than writing 2008, we can show that we have a good knowledge of English by saying a year later, which has the same meaning with 2008. And then the number kept climbing about 1% every year until reaching its peak in 2010. So the GDP's growth gradually increased over time by 1% every year approximately, and then it reached its highest number, peak means the highest, in 2010, over 6%. Okay, that's for paragraph 3, Japan's GDP. As for paragraph 4, Tunisia's and Ecuador's GDP, we can say it like this. Tunisia's GDP went downward from its highest, more than 6% in 2007, to above 4% in 2008. See, at first, the number was the highest, more than 6%, and then it decreased to around 4%, slightly more than 4%. And then the figure, or the number, figure means the number, they have the same meaning. The figure fell to its all-time low. All-time low means the lowest. They have the same meaning, but this is the synonym. The figure fell to its all-time low in 2010, 3%. Meanwhile, on the other hand, GDP of Ecuador at first I mean it's in 2007. At first elevated about 2% from 2007 to 2008. So in 2007 it was slightly over 3%, and a year later it reached almost 5%, so there was an increase about 2%, and then it then dove to the lowest in 2009 to more than 1%. See, from almost 5%, it fell significantly. It decreased significantly, or it dove to about 1% in 2009, before bouncing to slightly over 2% in the following year. By saying that, I mean in 2010, the number rebounded to slightly over 2% in the following year, in 2010. Okay, that's for paragraph 4. So this is the whole picture of the essay, and the word count is about 154 words, and that passes the 150 words minimum. So in that sense, we already make a summary of the bar chart, and then we already compared data were relevant, and then the number of words passes the threshold of 150. So that's it from me. Thank you for your time, and see you in my other videos.